Okay, hi everyone. I don't know why I said okay at the start of that. Don't need to do that.
Get it together, Pete.
I'll just chip that bit off.
If you were to ask me what my values were before and after becoming ill, I'll probably tell you they're the same, but actually my ability to live the values and actually believe the values are very different now compared to before.
Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of 80% Mental, a podcast all about the psychology of sport, performance, health and well-being. My co-host Leah is back with us today. Leah, what's going on? Anything?
How
Nothing?
are you?
I'm good actually. I've been not particularly well the last couple of weeks. Nothing major, just like a bit of flu, cough that I can't shift. But doing all right. Sun's out. It's a nice day. It's summer. How's things where you are?
Things are good. They're summer. It's Juneteenth today, so I'll date our recording. And yeah, it's been particularly warm this week. And it's going to be like blistering next week, and I'll be in Florida for that, so that'll be great. Perfect timing to be like 1 million degrees on the surface of the sun. But yeah, it's been not horrible.
Cool. Which dog have you got with you today?
Friedrich von Trapp.
Where's Doug Williams today?
Doug Williams is asleep, and he is right on the other side of my camera.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. Well, it's fascinating.
But Friedrich is being particularly Velcro-y today.
Yeah.
So.
Well, as fascinating as dogs on the other side of the camera are for podcast listeners, we'll get on with the podcast and introduce our guest for today. So it's an absolute pleasure to have our guest back on the podcast because he's been on before. And I just want to introduce Dr. Andrew Wood. Woody, welcome to 80%. Welcome back to 80% Mental.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. And yes, it is coming back. The last time we were on this was the haunted house episode.
That's right, yeah.
Providing us with random case examples and situations and how would you deal with it and sort of comparing. So that was probably about 4 years ago now. So
yeah, at least that.
A lot's happened since then.
Yeah, and we will get into a lot of what's happened since then in a little bit. I just want to sort of give you a little bit of an introduction for listeners who might not know who you are. So if you are unfamiliar with Woody's work, Andrew Wood is a performance psychologist and keynote speaker, a father, and I'm going to do that again. Andrew Wood is a performance psychologist and a keynote speaker. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, Dr. Andrew Wood is a performance psychologist and a keynote speaker. He was also a student of mine about 100,000 years ago at Sheffield Hallam University. I've got my teeth in today. Christ almighty, I can't speak. I'm going to try one more time. So Dr. Andrew Wood is a performance psychologist and a keynote speaker. He was a student of mine 1 million years ago at Sheffield Hallam University, studying sport and exercise science, and has then gone on to study for his master's degree and his PhD at Staffordshire University. Woody, is it fair to say, specialises in REBT as a sort of underpinning?
I'd use expertise loosely, but that's probably my area of speciality.
Right, we'll talk a little bit about REBT and how that works as a sort of therapeutic approach in a little bit. But you also spent a long time working in disability sport, particularly in blind football, and you're currently working in women's football with the FA. So we'll talk about some of that stuff throughout the episode. But yeah, welcome to 80% Mental.
Thank you very much. And again, thanks for having me on. Just to rewind a bit, Pete, I'm not in the FA. I'm working with TNS, a different team. Sorry, I didn't want in that just in case people are leaving and go, he doesn't work with the FA.
That's fine. What I'll probably do is I'll wait until we finish this and I'll just record myself introducing you. And just edit it in because I've absolutely fucked that up horrendously badly. But you're welcome anyway. So it's great. It's great to have you on.
For having me on.
So I guess to start with, then, I gave a little bit of your background just then. Tell us a little bit about your kind of experience and training. Like, what drew you to psychology in the first place, and kind of where did you start?
So I probably quite typically I did a sports science degree, like a huge percentage of the population in the country, and you're sort of heading in the direction that you think's the right one and what you want to do. But I'd probably say from the age of 11 till about second year university, I was probably quite inert and stagnant. I didn't really know what I wanted to do and where that purpose and meaning was in life. And you're doing jobs, you're finding out, you're trying things. And then I remember, of course, you were one of my tutors at university, and also I remember one of our final year sessions with Prof. Joanne Butt and Jeff Brecken, and they were doing about this is the pathway to being a sports psychologist, and this is relatively new, and this is what it looks like. And I'd always had a fascination with psychology, playing sport, but there's never a pathway, so actually don't go and choose it as a career. But as soon as that sort of came up on the screen, I remember the session vividly, and I thought, this is exactly what I want to do, because it sort of encapsulates all the things that are important to me in terms of what I enjoy, but also what maybe I'm seem to be naturally good at, but also what there was a demand for in the world as well. So it combined all those things together. And then I just went on a hunt for I basically spent about 3 years collecting a lot of certificates, essentially. So done the masters, had to do a diploma, then it went on to do PhD in stage 2 to become qualified. So although it felt like more time and education, actually the work began and the interest and started then. So ultimately it allows me to do a job where being on BBC Sport is part of my role, or looking at Sky Sports is part of my job role, and that's just incredible. So and since then I haven't looked back really in terms of sports psychology.
Awesome. So you found that kind of purpose and meaning that you were maybe looking for within sports psychology. So obviously you've done a lot of practical work as well as the academic stuff. Like, tell us a little bit about some of your experiences there. I know you worked a lot in disability sport in particular.
Yeah, so as part of my PhD, I was supervised by Jamie Barker and Martin Turner, and I was super lucky to have them as supervisors, but also the connections that we had. And I ended up doing some work with Paralympic and Paralympic sports, a partner research, which was applied. And then off the back of that, I started working with regional talent centres. So these are talent centres which then go on to the sort of elite parafootball setup. And this can be, deaf players, it could be cerebral palsy, it could be partially sighted and also blind, what we'll call B1, which is the most severe sort of visual classification. So I started in that, and then as my worked my way through, I then ended up and sort of fell into work with the England blind football team off the back of that, really. And then I ended up spending 5 years there, sort of really integrating with the team and understanding. And perhaps rather fortuitously, that time spent around disabled athletes was actually going to prove to be particularly useful down the line for me as well. So,
blind football, Leah, you ever watch blind football?
I have in the Paralympics. I have, yeah.
Okay.
I don't get it. It seems unfathomably difficult.
It's it is. And
did you ever have a go at it, Woody, when you were?
Yes, they took pleasure in letting me have a go at it. Because all of a sudden it felt like you're in their world now.
Yeah. And
it was a very scary, isolating place, put it that way, because you just freeze, because we're so. I was thinking about like what senses do I predominantly like rely on. I'm visual probably first, and as soon as that goes, it's scary. But they essentially just use a ball. I think it's got a ball bearing in, which then makes the noise, and they use guides and talking to each other and communication with each other to then allow them to basically ascertain a picture, a visualization of what is actually happening, even though they can't literally see anything. So it's very impressive.
Yeah, it's really, really impressive. The skill involved is, it's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's incredible. And one of the things about it is because it's actually quite physical. I know you've got the word football in it. It's probably a bit like a balance between rugby and basketball in that sort of end-to-end nature, but also the physicality, because in sports and, sighted, you can normally brace for impact. We can avoid impact, can't you?
Yeah.
Whereas actually inside football, there's big lads playing, and sometimes you can't avoid for it. These are unexpected hits. So often they're like concussion would be quite a big problem. So wearing head guards was a thing that came in as I was working with the team. And also coming back from injuries, broken noses, all these type of things are really come into play. So I think psychologically that was a big part of the game in terms of feeling confident in being able to play, but also letting go of that guarantee that you're going to be okay, because you never know what might be happening sometimes. Of course, I had an idea, but it was, slightly more unpredictable compared to sighted.
So I think one of the things I think we try to avoid, right, is like with any marginalized group of like putting them all in one like lump group. So I think one of the things that could potentially be really difficult for somebody working within a disabled population, like how do you navigate avoiding that trap of getting into this like group think about like what disability is, and how do we make sure that we are not sort of lumping all and like thinking like this is what disabled people are.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, just having that, being conscious about that is probably a good first step, because it thinks that you're probably thinking about them, and that's important. And when I first, joined the team, I did the thing that most people do, try and read up as much about it and research much about the specific group you're working with. And there wasn't a lot, to be honest, in terms of how to support. So I think I went in with the idea of trying to get as much knowledge as possible. But by the time I started work with the team, you realise that actually the setup was very typical of an elite performance setup. You've got multidisciplinary teams, you've got tournaments, you've got competitions, you've got organisations, performance directors, you've got goals you want to meet. So actually, broadly, it's very, very similar in terms of that high performance elite focus. But there are probably a couple things that really stood out to me, which I wasn't maybe typically used to. First one was around like levels of autonomy from people with various disabilities, and it's trying to navigate when is it that we need to help, when is it we need to support, versus when is it that actually we need to just let them get on with that. And over time you get used to it, and it's fine, because obviously blind, we're going to airports, we're going to guide them through airport security, all those things, really critical things you do. But there's also other times where they're completely able to do that on their own. And I think sometimes with disability, and something I've seen and also experienced myself now, is that you can be sort of infantilized when people do it without realizing, because you think, you can't do much, therefore you probably can't think like an adult, and you're probably a bit more like a child, and we need to help with these things, and the sort of credence to what you say reduces a little bit. And it's quite interesting to see that see that happen from like the first person perspective. But I guess what I really learned is that, yes, you can't generalize across the board, but broadly they are very extremely capable people, especially the players that I was working with. I should imagine the players I work with are some of the most competent blind people you get in the country, because of their ability to manage a job, manage work, manage relationships, and do all these types of things, but also travel around on trains and have that complete independence and really live meaningful, successful lives at the same time. So that was really, I guess, impressive to see, but it shouldn't be impressive because it's quite typical at the same time.
Yeah. I guess there's like this element of the way you would work with any athlete is utilizing the strengths that they already have and the skill set that they already have. So it's kind of identifying, well, what skills does this person have and how can we use them in a performance type environment?
Yeah, that's it. And it's a nice reframe that to think about it in terms of strengths of what they do, because when you put people in a position where their parameters of life are much narrower or different to the typical able-bodied individuals, you have to be flexible and adaptive in how you do that, and also psychologically, because maybe you can't say, right, I can't just go and walk over there. I have to wait for someone to walk me over there. What if I need the toilet? I can't just go to the toilet. I need someone to help me to go to the toilet. But I'm also trying to have a conversation with someone else. and then you're managing your internal emotions. So I think by sometimes not being able to control the environment you're in actually helps those people must start really managing how they manage their own emotions, irrespective of the environment, and allows them to become sort of emotionally aware and a bit more resilient to the sort of challenges of everyday life, because everything is just a little bit more complex and you have a little bit more forethought in everything that you do. So
I think it would be a challenge for, at least from like thinking through this, of finding that balance of like understanding their very specific and unique challenges that someone who is visually impaired must have, while also not like putting them on a pedestal of like, oh my God, you're amazing for like being able to overcome and achieve and like,
yeah,
and I think because we don't want to like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, like, we don't want to make it into something that it's not, but also like respecting that it can be something that is very difficult to navigate in a world that is built for people who are not visually impaired.
mm-hmm.
And, at the same time, I think it's very much one of those situations where if you have sight, can be difficult to relate in some way because it's such a different experience,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I had an interesting conversation with one of the athletes recently. I met up with one of the players and we were just talking about disability and changing our experiences. And we were saying that actually from their perspective, it's not actually that bad. It's actually perceived to be more worse from these particular athletes anyway, that is actually worse. Where actually the perception is you can't live meaningful lives, you can't do these things. When in reality for them, they're doing all sorts of incredible things. And actually it's relatively normal for them. And one way I got around that, and it's probably, this sounds so simple and this isn't going to blow anyone's minds, unfortunately. But, when I was unsure of anything or wanted help, I just asked them, like, how best can I do this? And maybe because I'm lazy, but it was just such an effective thing to ask them. Say, how can I help? Or how can I best do this? Because I don't know. And they'll go, yeah, just do this. And then it's so straightforward. And I think that's all you need sometimes, is someone to just show you don't have to completely empathize and understand. Actually just ask someone, how can I best help, is quite a simple way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, you say that that's not going to blow anyone's minds, but actually, like that's something that I think people find quite
I think it
difficult.
might.
Yeah, no, but I think it's something that some people might find quite difficult to do, out of a sense of, I don't know, embarrassment or awkwardness or whatever. But I think, yeah, that's not actually as easy as you might think. But it's such a, like you say, a simple thing to do.
Yeah, it's so simple, and I guess it maybe it takes some confidence, some security to ask people, how can I help? But I think it shows that you don't have any preconceptions. I think when you come in with some preconceptions about how you think that person either needs help, that's when the problems come up.
Yeah.
So, over my time with the team, it was just, sort of that classic client-centered sort of approach was the most successful.
Well, and I think also like it is a good reminder for being client-centered, like you said, that I think it can be easy for us as practitioners in whatever field it is to perceive ourselves as the expert, right? Of like, I'm the expert in sports psychology, you are coming to me for help, right? And the desire to want to fill that, but remembering that like, but in this context, I may not be the expert.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why having that question of like, okay, so I have this particular expertise, but like how it pertains to this exact thing, I might not know. And so reminding ourselves as practitioners to take that step back and to be, and to place and to center the client, I think is super, super important.
Yeah. And that's so applicable to all sports, isn't it? Irrespective of who you work with. It's the idea that you are the sort of the epicenter of your sport and you're the expert in that area, and this is what I bring, and let's work together and collaborate on that. And there'll be times where I need to pick your brains, and also be times when I'm going to hopefully give you some useful stuff to think about. So Yeah, it's a difficult balance to find, and not one you're always able to find straight away when you first start practicing. And I think it's taken time to develop those skills for sure.
I think going beyond sports psychology and beyond being a psychologist, it's actually just like a really useful way of going about your everyday life, right? I'm not the expert here. I have a set of expertise, and I know about this particular thing. But like, how can I help you? Like, what are you bringing to this, right? Approaching things with curiosity rather than that kind of like expert mentality, I think is just like, I think we should all probably do a bit more of that. So Woody, one of the areas that you draw on really heavily in your work, I know, is REBT, so Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. And I just want to spend a little bit of time kind of digging into that. We don't really normally do that so much on this podcast, kind of talk about specific approaches.
I do not. Okay.
So no, but I'm really curious. I'd like to kind of like, I know a little bit about it. I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about REBT and kind of how that works.
So REBT is a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. So I'm sure people are listening are very familiar with CBTs. So REBT is essentially one type of those. And it's probably one of the oldest, and it's quite heavily underpinned by Stoicism and Stoic philosophy as well as other things. And it's created by a chap called Albert Ellis, who used to be a psychoanalyst and got quite frustrated. So he ended up thinking, right, can I be more effective and functional and helpful in helping my clients? So off the back of that, he created Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, which looks at the way people think about themselves and situations, but what it really makes it distinct from other types of approaches is that it looks at people's core beliefs around irrational and rational beliefs. And basically what it says is that these core irrational beliefs are rigid, they're illogical, they're unhelpful, they're extreme, and they're probably a part of our ancestry to some degree, or evolutionary, they're sort of there for a reason, but perhaps in today's society where everything's a little bit nicer, more civilized, relatively speaking.
Relatively, yeah.
Definitely relatively. I'm not going to say that. Relatively speaking. And therefore, these sort of beliefs aren't particularly helpful and actually are self-defeating. And I don't know if the beauty is the right word, but the thing about this is that everyone has these beliefs, and you can't just suddenly Control A and delete these beliefs and go, right, I want to be rational. Actually, it's about how can we be more rational in these moments and think in ways which are more helpful.
What kind of beliefs are we talking about here? We've got like examples.
So the 4 core beliefs that you might come across, and people listening might be more familiar with them, is in terms of, one is around demanding beliefs. So let's use something like success or achievement. I really would like to be successful, therefore I absolutely must. And the must bit is the
right, okay,
rational bit. And then you have a belief around like low frustration tolerance, whereas people think things are completely intolerable or unbearable, which we know isn't true, because things might be extremely difficult, but doesn't mean they're unbearable. Because unbearable essentially means that you're going to implode on the spot and just disappear. And then we have awfulizing beliefs, which might be more familiar in terms of thinking something is the end of the world, 100% bad. And it's different to catastrophizing, which is thinking something is slightly worse than it is. Awfulizing is thinking something's 100% bad. Mm-hmm. So I might say, go drive down the road on the motorway and someone might cut me up and I'll feel like it's awful, it's the end of the world, and I might react in a really, really big way, where in reality we know that it's probably not.
Yeah.
And then the final one, which is probably feels like the strongest one, is around this sort of generalization that it's called like self-downing. So because I messed up today, I might do a really bad podcast today. It might come across really badly. That makes me a complete failure. So you're sort of over-generalizing sort of particular instances across the board. And that's quite profound and quite a significant core belief. Yeah. That then impacts anxiety, anger issues, depression. And it comes from clinical settings, but we've sort of gone, right, let's think about how we can use this for performance.
So these are beliefs that we kind of all have, and I'm pretty sure people will resonate with the examples that you've just given there. But when we break them down, that they're not rational. They're kind of irrational thoughts, but we just believe them to be true. The problem is that we don't rationalize them. So this is where REBT comes in, right?
That's it, yeah. So the process would be like, the reason why they're considered irrational is not based on like subjectivity of, oh, we think that doesn't make sense, they're not true. They're based upon these sort of arguments that we use to dispute. And one is like, are these beliefs actually true? Second is it logical? Does it make sense for that belief to be true? Just because I want a Ferrari, Pete, does it mean I must have one? And logically, you could argue that it's probably, I'd like that to be the case, but it doesn't mean I have to have one.
Yeah.
And then also, which I think is probably the most useful part, is looking at it in terms of like helpful. Are these beliefs helping you get to where you want to get to, or is it taking you away from where you get to? So that's sort of the practical element and also factual element of it. So we sort of dispute, and then you replace them with more rational alternatives. So they're like cousins in terms of the irrational, rational ones, and you have the rational ones. And the aim is to just really lift those up. And these aren't like your everyday sort of thoughts where you're walking around and you're thinking, oh, that's terrible, I'm a complete failure. These are sort of deep and core. Mm-hmm. So rather than like shifting just sort of superficial thoughts, you're more shifting people's core philosophies about how they view adversity, which can be quite profound when you get it right.
Yeah. Leah, is this something that you've come across or something that you use with your work with athletes?
Yeah, I actually do. Because I work a lot with self-talk with a lot of my athletes. And so a lot of that is sort of like challenging those core beliefs of, I use a lot of like countering, right? So it's like, okay, if you are in fact the worst cross-country runner on your team, what's your evidence for that? Prove it to me. I'm willing to accept the fact that might be true. Mm-hmm. So tell me why you think this is true. Right. And then kind of like do almost like a Socratic questioning mm-hmm. of, objectively, like you're a Division I athlete. So like you can't be the worst on the planet. Right. So let's talk through that for a second and sort of like have them build their case. And then they usually can't.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I've actually have accomplished some things. I actually do these things. And then I flip it around. I did this with a gymnast that I was working with. And we were working on like trusting herself. Right. And I was like, you give me the reasons why you should be able to trust yourself. Right. And sort of like challenging this belief of like, I don't know if I can pull it off. I don't know if I can do these things. It's been bad in the past. And I don't know if I can handle it if I fall again, and sort of like building up that resiliency mm-hmm. towards adversity of like, okay, if you do fall, like what's the worst thing what's happened in the past? How have you handled it? Like,
yeah,
and sort of like, oh, I actually have done this before, and sort of like challenging, if I do this, I'm not going to be able to handle it, and helping them see like, well, you actually have done it already. Mm-hmm. You have done it. You can do this. And so building up, reframing that belief of like in sort of like that objective way of like, oh, I actually have evidence of this, that in a roundabout way, creating that dissonance between their belief and between their objective reality of like what they have actually done.
Yeah. Taking their thought to court, I believe, is the pithy rhyme that we can use. But it is about that kind of creating that sort of evidence.
It was kind of fun because he was like, I'm terrible at running. And I was like, okay, why? And he was like, well, I feel like I'm dying. And I was like, everybody feels like that when you're running, buddy. Like, I don't know, like you're running a 5-minute mile. I think that's like, it's gonna be hard.
Yeah. What's interesting about the REBT and makes it distinct to maybe more like stuff like cognitive therapy is that it sometimes, you can challenge a sort of more superficial inferences. So like, Pete sorry, I keep using you as an example, Pete, but Pete disrespecting me today. And then
I didn't, by the way.
No, he did. I saw it.
Yeah, 2v1. Pete disrespected me today. And rather than as a practitioner saying, no, I was there, I don't think he was disrespecting you. It was actually this, rather than sort of, because actually he might have been doing it. And that's the truth sometimes, especially in sport. There's things that do happen. So in REBT, it accepts that's the situation. And he goes, okay, so you have been disrespectful. Does it mean you have to be respected all the time? Is it terrible? Does it make you a complete loser if you've been disrespected? And actually, no. So at like a baseline level, you can deal with disrespect in a healthy, functional way, rather than thinking, actually trying to tell yourself, actually, no, he was just had a bad day. I was one off. He still loves me. He still thinks I'm amazing, blah, blah, blah type stuff, and sort of helping them. Because if you can tolerate that, then anything else can be sort of a little bit more, better to tolerate. Yeah.
Well, I do think you're amazing, for the record. We're going to throw in a little bit of a break there, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about your own kind of personal experiences. This is the 80% Mental Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Andrew Wood, Leah Washington, as always. We've been talking about Andrew's experience working in disability sport, and we've just been talking a little bit there about REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, as a way of perhaps working with some of the unhelpful, irrational beliefs that we have. Woody, I want to switch gears a little bit. And you've kind of mentioned it a couple of times in the first part there, but I want to talk about your experience of becoming disabled yourself, and kind of experiences through the COVID pandemic. I guess the best way for me to do that is to kind of just give the floor to you and ask you to tell us a little bit about your experience.
So, yeah, like many people 5 years ago, we're all caught off guard in terms of the COVID pandemic. And I ended up getting COVID, like most people, relatively mild, thankfully. And then for whatever reason, which we're starting to understand, it just never left my body. And whereas for other people, they seemed to just shake it off. They felt a bit rough. Weeks later, it was okay. Of course, there was the much more serious side of it.
Yeah.
But across the general population, everyone seemed to sort of relatively shake it off. Whereas for a subgroup, and which I was involved in, was that it ended up sticking around. And what we generally know now is that it essentially, the virus basically then triggers other viruses which are hanging around in your body beforehand, which you didn't know were there, and then it sort of creates them, and then it just never leaves. So it causes this sort of cardiovascular illness, disease, complete immunological dysfunction, and basically chronic inflammation across the entirety of your body. So I ended up just going backward and backward and backward. And I was training for the Manchester Marathon at the time, and I remember my last run being 34k, thinking, right, that's my last run. I'm ready to go now. And then, a week later, I couldn't walk upstairs, and then I'm thinking, all right, I'm just going to shake this off now. Maybe a few more weeks, I'll be fine. And that weeks turned into months. And then months turn into years, and then we're still here 5 years later. The worst part of it was when I was getting the vaccines. I'm not anti-vax by any stretch, but the vaccines did make me worse. To the point that I think it was December 2022, I basically went to bed and stayed in bed for the year. That was it. By that point, I couldn't talk to anyone. I couldn't really listen. I had to have big builders headphones on because any sound sensitivity was really bad. And I had no energy. So I had 15 steps. I used to count these steps every day, and that was my limit. I could walk to the toilet once, and that was it. Everything else had to be done in the bed. So I basically almost become like buried alive. And it was about 6 to 9 months when I was in that point. That was definitely the darkest period, because it wasn't like, oh, you've just got like a long flu and you'll get better. People in these situations very rarely get better. So there's no empirical evidence to say that you get better. Yeah, there's people, with chronic fatigue syndrome are still in a dark room, 4 decades later, trying to understand why is it them that they're the ones in that room. So it was very, very dark. But then had to go that private route, medically, and then ended up starting to sort of layer on. And thankfully, the research is catching up in terms of how to help people. So the silver lining is there's so many people with long COVID that actually there's a need. If you look at it crudely, there's a financial need to help these people, as well as an altruistic one. So the research is getting there and starting to understand what's really going on. But I guess the physical side is one thing, Pete and Leah, but it's the psychological side was probably the most interesting, because
tell us a little bit about that.
It basically switched my nervous system into the sort of threat state the whole time, perpetual threat state. So I was relatively relaxed, quite peaceful person before all of this, and then when it happened, all of a sudden I was extremely attuned to the threat. My body felt like it was always in drive state and always worried about something happening. And there was definitely a link between those two. It might be sort of vagal nerve stuff. It might be obviously nervous system things going on, but there was definitely disruptions between those. And that had a big impact. So well as the physical, it was also the mental side that was challenging.
So I guess when you were, when this first happened and you're in that state of kind of not really knowing what's going on, like talk us through that if you don't mind, because we talked a little bit about beliefs and thoughts and tackling some of those. Like, what was kind of some of the things that were going on there for you?
The first bit was probably the hardest, because you're in a position where you've been told by doctors that you're dealing with COVID badly, mentally. So I was like, you've had a moment, I feel like I was having heart attacks in the shower, couldn't breathe, could barely walk. And I was like, look, I was running marathons, like ultra marathons last year, and they're telling you that this is probably maybe psychological. So that was extremely difficult to be like, this is what gaslighting probably feels like on a highest level. And they probably don't realize they're doing it either. They weren't purposely doing it. This was just them doing it. So difficult. And we all know the sort of culture of high performance, and high performing people are very driven. It's all about perseverance. The body will follow where the brain goes, and that's all fine. And that mentality that we try and help and instill in athletes, we also probably to some degree, I definitely harbour in myself. And it's that exact mentality is by far the worst mentality to have in those situations, because you've got to stop and let go and just stop trying to drive through it and grit your teeth. Because essentially in an illness like this, or chronic condition, the more you grit your teeth, the more you try and persevere, the more you get. And there's no guarantee that you'll ever get back. So I was in a very, very unfamiliar place mentally, and also like socially. My partner found it difficult because I was no longer the person that I was, because you're unable to do jobs, care for your kids, and all these types of things. So it was a very slippery slope, and it was a very dark period of time for sure. And at my worst, I reckon I was suicidal for about 6 months. Most days I was probably really, really trying to stick it out, just because of everything, really. Yeah.
I think, one of the most difficult things for me that I'm kind of hearing is like, when a chronic condition happens like this, I think sometimes it's really difficult, at least from my perspective, I'm not trying to speak for you, Woody, of the constant comparison of like what you are versus what you wish you were, or what things used to be, and finding that new like normal of, okay, well, like I know that this is what you want it to be, but it's not that. And I think that is probably, I could see for me being one of the most difficult parts of that process, being sort of stuck in wanting it to be something that it's not.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, I think, there.
Or never will be, right?
It never will be. And I've definitely got to the point where there's a level of acceptance. And acceptance easy to talk about, hard to truly believe in, I think. And even though I intellectually knew that's the way I need to think, believing it and experiencing it was a completely different ball game. So that took time and darkness and those experiences. But it does shift over time for sure. But hit the nail on the head there, I think.
And I think also, like, just generally speaking, whenever I hear, speaking as like a healthcare professional myself, when I have a patient whose condition may, or, maybe it is psychological, or maybe it's being made worse by their psychological state. It's so frustrating when I hear other medical people being like, well, there's nothing wrong with you. It's psychological.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the psychological part is the thing that is wrong, right? Like, you can't say like clearly I'm in a bad state. So like, there is something wrong with me. Even if it is a psychological,
Even if it is,
mechanism,
yeah,
that doesn't mean nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so frustrating. And it's so frustrating. I actually had a chronic pain athlete that was referred to me. And part of the process for her was like, I believe your pain is very real. I just don't think it's a physical mechanism. And I think for her, that was like such a mind-blowing thing to hear of like, you are absolutely in pain. I 100% believe you. I just don't think it's anatomical. Right. And sort of recognizing that like, you can't just be like, well, there's nothing wrong with you. Okay. But like, well, there clearly is. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So you obviously, 5 years on, you are coming out of it a little bit, and you've kind of been doing a lot more the last probably year or so in terms of getting back into doing a little bit of work and kind of talk to us a little bit about how, as a psychologist, right, you talk about this stuff, you work with other people with this stuff, like how have you applied what you know about psychology to your own recovery and kind of reemergence?
The psychological side of things with these sort of chronic illnesses, what I've seen and experienced won't very rarely be the cure, but it will help them cope with the experience, and that is utterly foundational in helping do all the other things. And of course, they're so intricately linked with one another. Beyond like mind and body, it's like the mind and the nervous system and the immune system and the endocrinological system, and all these systems, they're all interconnected. So super connected. And it was fortuitous that I had all this experience. And I think one of the ones that I found super useful, because I went through counselling and also therapy myself and antidepressants as well. So I had the full gamut of psych support, which I needed and actually was super valued across the board. Chronic illnesses seem to lend itself well to something like ACT because it's perpetual. It never assuages, it never disappears. So, okay, how can we then lead into it rather than daily trying to fight and control my inner state? So if I get symptoms, I think, oh no, I'm getting worse, my symptoms are coming back. Rather than trying to control that, lean in, accept, be mindful. What are my values?
Yeah. So ACT is acceptance commitment therapy.
Sorry, yeah.
It's just this idea that rather than trying to get rid of thoughts and emotions and sensations that we think of as unhelpful, we're instead trying to accept that they are there and live in a kind of value direction, do the things that we really value anyway, even in the presence of those things that we find uncomfortable. You mentioned acceptance earlier as well, didn't you?
Yeah. Acceptance is quite a broad term. I think it can be sometimes different things, but in this term, it's the acceptance of, I don't have to like it, but I can accept that this is how I'm feeling, and there's no judgment on those experiences. And it also really helps to understand what your values are in terms of how it is you want to live your life. And if you were to ask me what my values were before and after becoming ill, I'll probably tell you they're the same, but actually my ability to live the values and actually believe the values are very different now compared to before. Because I used to talk a good game.
Yeah.
But now I'm probably actually living a good game in terms of what my values are and how I'm sticking to those as much as possible.
Well, can you give us an example of what you mean? But I'm really interested in that.
So, people always, I don't know if it's controversial, but people say, oh, family and friends are really important and they're the number one things to me, but they'll spend 95% of their life working or not being around their kids. And there's that dissonance between behaviour, and you'll spend time on what is important to you. And I know there's other reasons why we spend time on those things, but perhaps I was a little bit more like that. in terms of saying, these are things I think I should be saying to people and things what I think should be important. But actually, this is what I really want to do at the moment is I just want to try and be career focused. I want to just try and do loads of fun things or whatever. Whereas now it's become much more crystallized in terms of what is really important and how do I stick by those things and why it's so important to have those at difficult moments. Because at the moment, like, there's no finish line as such. So you don't know if you might get worse again, if you get better, whatever it might be. And not knowing whether you're going to get better again is all right, because I've got that sort of guide in terms of this is on how I'm going to live a meaningful life still, even without an idea of where it might end up.
Leah, that's really interesting, isn't it? This idea that, like, we all have values, but sometimes actually, I think the phrase you used, Woody, was like the things that we feel like we're supposed to tell people our values are rather than what they actually are.
Yeah.
And then you've got this sort of like real, illness that's brought those values into stark reality rather than just being this kind of theoretical thing.
I was reading, it makes me think of, I was reading Lance Armstrong's biography a while ago, and he talked about when he first got his cancer diagnosis, and someone said to him that he was like, "We're the lucky ones." And he was like, "What are you talking about? I have cancer." And they were like, "Well, we're but the point was like, it's such a clarifying experience that, to Woody's point of like really understanding what's important to you, becomes very acute. And when you're faced with, something as significant as a chronic illness or, a cancer diagnosis or something, like your priorities become super duper clear. And so for him, it really shifted his perspective of like, I thought this thing was important to me. And I spent, to your point, like 1 billion hours on the bicycle. And then I realized like that's right now, not important at all, actually. And, it really sort of drove home that idea of like, whether or not he would have called it lucky in retrospect of getting a chronic illness, but just the idea of like things become like, you really have to think about like what is actually important to me in this moment, and what do I really want to do, and what does it mean to have a meaningful life?
Yeah. So it's so good, isn't it? Interesting. And I always struggle with this, like. So, and from a practitioner's perspective, because we're trying to help people maybe realize these situations, but we don't want to put everyone in chronic illness positions or go through a significant illness or life event to then have that realization. So I'm always trying to find myself thinking, well, how can we get to that point without having to go through that point? Because you don't want to put anyone through that point. And is it possible? And is it just about nudging people into that direction? How can we have those realizations? And I don't think I've got the answer, unfortunately, quite yet. But sometimes when you burn everything to the ground and start again, that classic like metaphor around the soil becomes richer after scorching the earth types thing, that you can go again. And that is a valuable thing. And perhaps it's useful for athletes or performers when challenging things happen in their life. Actually, sometimes it is a fruitful opportunity to just completely wipe the slate clean and start again and think about what your next chapter of your life might look like.
I always think about like, because I do a values exercise with my students, and a lot of them are going into like coaching or, whatever. If they say like, here are my top values, we kind of go through like, how do we determine our values? And I always challenge them of like, how would I know that? If I just went and watched you coach at practice, how would I know that these are your values? What would, in your behavior and in your interactions with your athletes and in your everyday life, would I be able to figure that out just by watching you? And I think for some of them, that's a really hard question to answer. Would you know based on my like words and my actions? Like, could you be able to figure it out without asking me?
It's that like,
that's a great question.
Yeah, like classic challenge between what we want to be or what we think we should be versus what we actually do and what we actually are. And I guess we're always forever trying to, I don't know, bring those things closer together or trying to find the balance between those two things. Just like with the beliefs, like people say, when it kind of comes to REBT, sort of linking it back to that, talks about, oh, no, it's not the end of the world when things happen. I know that doesn't make me a complete failure, but when they lose, you see them have a complete meltdown. And again, there's that distance between what you believe and what you're telling yourself versus what the reality is. And it's similar perhaps in terms of your values. And that's probably quite similar across the board.
So let's kind of flip it around a little bit. We talked about how you might use psychology during your illness and kind of during coming out of your illness. But what have you learned about psychology from the experience of being ill?
So one part of psychology, which I think, I'm not sure whether this is talked about enough, and I can understand why it's not talked about enough. And I think that experience taught me and changed my relationship with life and death. Because you spend so much time thinking about it and actually appreciating the term, there are fates worse than death. That sort of chronic illness, chronic pain, those experiences, really suffering, actually. Death sounds like, and I say this with complete sensitivity and respect, but in those moments, death seemed like a peaceful place, a calm, peaceful place to just get out of the body that I was stuck inside. And I think over time, I started using reason and clarity, and again, drawing on like Stoicism. One of the central areas around Stoicism is death. Not to celebrate it or not to romanticize it, but to almost place it front and center. And Seneca's got a great quote, which is something like, if to learn about death is to unlearn slavery. So the idea that the more you don't have to like it, we're not searching for it, but actually accept it for what it is. And therefore that breaks the shackles off for what you then can do in life. So it allows you to better live your life. And I guess that could be applied to sport, like where can you accept failure and losing or rejection, and can you accept that, and therefore that breaks the shackles on you then paradoxically better able to go and be the best version of yourself. And I've definitely feel like I've had that change. And I'm not religious from my perspective. I'm not a particularly religious person, so I'm always trying to reconciliate what that death process looked like. And you always think, well, actually, if you'd ask someone, what was it like the last 7 billion years before you were alive or whatever, you go, don't know. Nothing happened. No perception of it. Nothing happened. Like I personally
probably all right.
Probably right. Well, it can't be good or bad.
Dinosaurs are cool.
Yeah, just sort of floating around watching the dinosaurs do their thing. But we can't be good or bad, I guess, can it? Because we don't have a perception, and that's the way I'm looking at it at the moment. I may change down the line, but it's this sort of there's no perception or anything. So. And that's been very liberating in terms of life and living, and being comfortable with talking about death and understanding what it is and really looking and examining it. And then that's allowed me to better live my life. And I think it's not particularly spoken about much, really, I don't think, because if you're not particularly paralyzed by the thought of death, then what else in life is going to really, really throw you off? That's going to be that troubling, apart from maybe the fear of dying itself.
I think there's something to be said for making sort of value neutral statements. And this kind of, I think, goes back to the REBT of it all, of like, not to have a value of like, is this a good or bad thought, but is this a helpful or unhelpful thought, right? And like, is this, we often try to ascribe, I think, the value of like, is my life good or bad? Right? But taking the value away from it and say like, okay, this is my life. What does it mean? What does it mean for me? Is this a helpful way to live? Is this a fulfilling way to live? I don't know. I think I'm just also like you, kind of like thinking out loud about this of like, I think sort of maybe removing some of that like arbitrary goodness or badness can be useful. Of like, if you lose, it's bad. If you are rejected, it's bad. Well, no, you are rejected. what does that mean for us? What do we believe about that? How can we process it? I don't know. Is that making any sense at all?
Yeah, no, it does.
I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
sure. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Pete?
yeah. I mean, I think I'd need more time to think about it.
Yeah, sorry to throw that.
No, it's fine. It's okay. Because it's really interesting, and I'll probably take this out. But like, as I've gotten like older, you know, and I'm not ancient or anything, but like you do start to, you know, and you perhaps start to maybe like lose people as well, like family members and kind of friends go through health issues. You do start to kind of think a little bit more about your own mortality. And yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, how do you kind of reconcile that?
Yes,
with the stuff that I know about psychology and like, again, you know, living a valued life and like ultimately what does that really mean? And
yeah, because you listen to people who got friends and family who are religious, and they have sort of beliefs that help them reconciliate what the death process is going to be like. And because I personally don't believe in that, then it's like, well, how am I thinking about it? What's guiding, I've got a framework for guiding my life, but how do I think about those things? And that's sort of the reason and clarity really helps in really trying to finalize, actually, it's just, you know, the complete absence of perception means that actually, in some, this might sound controversial, you may want to take this out, but there's some people talk about mortality being a gift. Well, no, dying being a gift, because why would you want to stick around for the whole time?
that is a very, very good point.
You know, talk about last year, my father was particularly ill. He was on dialysis, and actually the dialysis process was a gift for him, because he was in a lot of pain, ill, and we had a conversation, and actually coming off dialysis was the choice to say, I want peace now. I don't want to carry on with this. And that was actually a gift. So it's, and consciousness doesn't come across like we love death or those type of things, but it's almost like because we're comfortable with it and around it, allows us to do all the other things without all of this baggage about worry and fear, I guess. Yeah.
I think like that idea of an absence of perception is like an interesting one. I think like for me, it's like a genuine thought that I've had, and this definitely isn't going in, is just that I finally just get some fucking sleep. I finally, you know, but really interesting conversation, none of which will make it to air. This is the 80% Mental podcast, and I'm here with co-host Dr. Leah Washington and our guest today, Dr. Andrew Wood. And we've been talking about Andrew's experience of working in disability sports, experience of becoming disabled himself, and that experience of long COVID. And we've just been very cheerily talking about death. We're going to switch things up in the crassest of ways now.
Hard left turn,
right? Because we want to, I mean, I feel like we've definitely got to know you a little bit more through some of your experiences, but we want to get to know you, the person, rather than you, the psychologist. So are you up for playing our little game that we didn't have last time you were on the podcast?
Yes, any game. Yeah, sounds good. As long as it doesn't involve rapping about random topics, which you've done with previous guests. So.
No, to be honest, I forgot we'd done that.
I remember it vividly. That's one of the highlights.
Oh, poor Josephine Perry. She wasn't happy about that. Yeah. Joe Davies came through though. Okay, so our getting to know you game is I've got a series of quick fire questions, right, on different topics. I've got 4 virtual envelopes with some different topics. Topics are this and that. This or that, favorites and first, hypotheticals and perspectives. And I'm going to get you to choose a number between 1 and 4, and we'll see what set of questions we've got today.
3, please.
3, okay. And our set of questions today is this or that. So quick fire questions. No time to think. Let's get straight on with it. Okay. Make a call or send a text?
Text.
Text.
Was that text as well for you, Leah?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, who likes phone calls?
Ugh, gross.
So true. Why?
I know. But what did we do before texts? Right? Not only. Are you kidding?
That's got to be Leah. That's not me.
Is the train back?
That's such a like classic sort of American
I
sounding train.
know.
It's so cool.
I bet somewhere there's a guy running to get on the train with his dog to sit in a carriage.
Yeah.
Bit of straw hanging out his mouth and the side door open, traveling across country. But yeah, I mean, do you remember what we used to do before text messaging? Right? Not only did you have to ring people up, right, but you had to ring somebody's house and then ask if they were there.
Yeah.
Right? So you'd like ring the house and then somebody's parents would answer and you'd have to, oh, is so-and-so there? Can I speak to them?
Yeah. I know. My mum used to make me practice speaking to other people's parents on the phone, very politely. So
Can you imagine? Remember, we used to pick up the phone not knowing who was calling us.
I know. Imagine.
Like, that's wild.
Yeah.
It could be anybody.
I mean, I'm pretty sure most people do this. I don't answer my phone if I don't know who's calling.
Yeah.
Nope.
Let's leave it.
Yeah, unless you're feeling mischievous and you're thinking, right, I'm going to wind up some cold callers here. But
every now and then.
Sorry.
Okay. Rainy day or sunny day, Woody?
Sunny.
Leah?
Yeah, sunny day.
Yeah. See, I'm a bit of a misery. I like.
Although,
I like
you know, a rainy day can be nice and cozy.
I was just
You're
thinking.
from Northeast, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's synonymous with the sort of what you brought up on.
That explains it. Yeah. Iced coffee or hot coffee?
Hot coffee.
Hot.
I don't do coffee, so I don't care. Sunglasses or hats?
Sunglasses.
Yeah, sunglasses.
Yeah, I have an unfeasible collection of both. It's a bit of a bone of contention in our house, how many pairs of sunglasses and how many hats I've got.
Oh, really? Are you going to be on that Stacey Solomon's program of Clear Your House Out soon, where you've got so many? I've got 140 pairs of sunglasses. You've got to get rid of them.
No, I need them.
Yeah, I need all of it. It's not at that stage yet, but yeah, probably too many that.
How many have you got? Just out of interest.
More than anyone needs. I don't.
I like the yet as a qualifier.
I honestly don't really know. But what I like doing is, when you like go to like Gran Canaria or something, there's someone selling like Roy bombs.
Yeah.
Like I'll just buy them for like a few. All right. Silence or background music?
Background music.
Background music.
Yeah. Would you just kind of question that's just kind of occurred to me, when you were like having those sort of dark times when you were, kind of in bed for quite a long time. Like, did you said you were kind of sensitive to sound as well. Like, did you have any kind of sensory input? Did you like watch TV or like listen to music, or was it literally just kind of?
No, it got to the point where I couldn't have anything. So builder's headphones on. Sometimes I have to wear an eye mask or darken room, just because it takes energy to tolerate these senses. So it was only thing you could really control by that point was your thoughts. So it's pretty
it's pretty rough.
Yeah, pretty rough. It relates to a thing that is a bit popular at the moment with the young folks. We said raw dogging.
Oh,
essentially.
Raw dogging, yeah.
And people brag about raw dogging on a plane for 12 hours. Like, well, try it for a year in bed. That's that's the proper raw dogging. But yeah, it makes me laugh.
All right. City or country?
Country.
City.
Yeah, I'm city as well, I'm afraid. I don't do the country. I'm not welcome in the country. That's unfair. I don't mean it. It was a joke. Smart suit and tie or jeans and a hoodie?
Jeans hoodie.
Yeah, same. Leah? Dressy dress?
I'm kind of a fancy bitch, so I kind of like wearing a smart suit.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm not going to do cats or dogs, because if you don't say dogs, you're dead to me. Okay, let's finish with this one. No. Zombies or pirates?
Pirates.
Do I want to fight a zombie or pirate, or do I want to be a zombie or pirate?
The question is yours to do with what you like.
I think pirate.
Fair.
Though I don't really like the ocean, so I don't.
A land-based,
That's a tough
land-based pirate.
Yeah, I'll be a land-based pirate.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, last one then. A good book or a good podcast?
Book.
I want to say book, but I do listen to a lot of podcasts because I can usually do that while I'm doing other things,
right?
Like if I'm washing the dishes or like driving.
Yeah. Woody, you said good book. What was the last good book that you read?
It was something about explorers. Hang on, let me just get it up because I can't remember the name of it. It was actually relatively quite good. It was called
so good that you can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
The Explorer's Gene by Alex Hutchinson. So he's a chap who just does journalism about sport and sciencey things, and basically that's his niche now. And he's knuckled down on why people explore and go and do things and develop and do these crazy events, but also why do humans grow and stretch themselves and what's going on there. So yeah, that was a good one, I'd say.
Sounds interesting. All right. Well, Woody, thank you so much for playing our little game. I feel like we've gotten to know you a little bit better.
Loved every second of it.
So this is the 80% Mental podcast, and we've just had a really fascinating conversation over this episode. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, don't forget to subscribe at 80percentmental.com or wherever you listen. And you can follow us on Twitter at EPM Podcast or on Instagram at 80percentmental. Like, share, all that good social media stuff, and leave us a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Take you a couple of minutes, and it would be would really help us out. So, what do you got? Just a couple of questions left. If you've got a little bit of time for us.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay, fantastic. So, you and I have spoken offline about this before, but what are some of the things that irk you about psychology? What are some of the things that just get right on your nerves?
Oh God, psychology is everyone's to some degree because of course it is, and therefore, what perhaps frustrates me is maybe I frustrate myself because we spend 95% of our time thinking about learning, developing the content, knowledge, theory, evidence, research, and then we try and help people. But I spend 5% of my time trying to share with people and impact the masses. Whereas in society, you get sort of people who spend 5%, maybe less, on the content of what they're talking about, but they'll spend 95% of their time on how to market it, how to get it out there. But that then becomes an influential thing. So I guess I'm irritated at myself and the psychologist because we should be doing better to share the things that are impactful and helpful for people, and it's going to reach the masses rather than this sort of niche paper that we publish, which 20 people have read over time. And I know you do a good job of that, Pete, and I message you quite a lot, sort of chuckling, I have a weekly snigger when your videos come up, sort of shoulder chuckling to myself about something, how to open a bottle of water or how to sit down in a room or whatever. But yeah, I think that's where I want to try and take myself in terms of trying to reach the masses a bit more, but not straying away from science, but making it simpler and clearer. And I think, that's a bit of a skill. But yeah.
Do you know what I really liked that you said then was that you framed that as you being kind of like annoyed at yourself for not doing more of that stuff rather than just being angry at the influencers and just being angry at because it's really easy to fall into that trap, isn't it? Of like look at these people just like peddling nonsense. I'm really angry about it. But actually you're kind of, what you take from that is, well, I want to do more to correct that.
Yeah, because we're psychologists, so we might not be specialists in marketing, but we know humans to some degree. So we should have a very good base to be able to do that side of things. So crikey, why aren't we doing it? And you're starting to see it more of it, aren't you? And it's actually becoming easier to do that. So Yeah, but yeah, I do have my good moan about his influences from time as well. So,
What do you still love about it?
I think what's my equivalent to scoring a goal for athletes is probably those moments when you connect with people. You might have a session where the light bulb goes, or you're in a group and you just feel so connected and you feel like they're hanging on to every word in terms of they're really listening and it's resonating. And as I've got back into psychology, I've had a couple of those moments. It doesn't happen all the time because otherwise that's just unrealistic, but you just have those moments to go, oh, that's exactly why you're doing it, because it's those moments. And I think there's never always a clear answer in psychology compared to other areas. It's a bit more challenging. It's a bit more multifaceted. And I like that. As soon as something feels like it's easy, I sort of go off it very quickly. And psychology doesn't always feel straightforward. So, yeah, that's probably my favourite bits.
I want to, just before we finish up, first of all, thank you for being a little bit vulnerable with us on the podcast today and sharing your experience with us. I'd love to know in the last 5 years, what you've really truly learned about yourself, that you think would be useful to pass on.
What have I learned about myself? I've probably learned that it's probably acceptance. It's come up a lot, isn't it, today? And I think there's a reason why it's come up a lot. And it's just the acceptance that while I was sort of in bed, you sort of feel like you're not doing anything, but you're growing a lot and you're learning a lot and understanding a lot. And it's almost like I always wanted to know where I was going or how things are going to be. But there's that acceptance that I am the way I am, other people the way they are, life is the way they are. And there's something quite liberating to that sort of position. And it's taken me away from that the classic cliche. I'm sorry to bring it up, but the journey sort of over the outcome type thing. And I know it's borderline trite at the moment, that sort of saying, but actually it's certainly pertinent, and it's sort of taking the pressure off a little bit, I guess. Yeah.
And I guess
that's a big question, Pete. That was.
Say again.
That was a big question.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing compared to this one. You talked about this a little bit earlier on. You were saying that your illness really brought your values into stark. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Really brought your values like to the forefront. And you talked about this idea of a meaningful life. So my last question, Woody, is what is a meaningful life to you?
Meaningful life to me. A meaningful life to me is one, and I was having a chat with my partner last night actually, and talking about bits and bobs, and she said, "Oh, are you going to write a book or anything?" I'm like, "No, I'm not going to write a book because I'm not sure anyone really wants to read it, because I can't imagine it will help people. I can't quite make that link." And she's like, "It doesn't have to help. It can just be interesting." And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because for me, helping is a meaningful life, making a difference, doing something, bringing around change. And I'm sort of questioning whether that actually needs to be like that at the moment. But for me, I love being a dad, because you develop in supporting children, and a partner, working with athletes or leaders, whoever, helping them develop, be the best possible version of them. And it's just making an impact, I think, and leaving something behind, and having that impact seems to be perhaps what's meaningful for me. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that answer, and thank you for, like I say, your sort of honesty and vulnerability, and willingness to share your experiences on today's episode. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Leah, obviously, thank you as well. Any thoughts?
It makes me think of, as you were talking, Woody, which I'm really struck by this idea of like, well, it doesn't have, like, people don't have to read it for you to write it.
Mm.
Like, that's not the answer.
Mm.
It is the writing.
Yeah.
That's the important part, right? And I think that's sort of like such a nice little encapsulation of who cares if anybody reads it. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And sort of like, to your point of like letting go of like that expectation, right? Because to you, the why would I write a book if no one's going to read it? The expectation is that, well, people will have to read it, but do they have to?
I was chatting literally yesterday with a coach about kind of living in line with values, and he was saying that, you know, he was really kind of trying to think a little bit more about connection with family. So, you know, they've got this family WhatsApp group, and he sent like a message because he was away from home for the week. So sent a message on his family WhatsApp group because, you know, this was something that was important to him. And he was explaining that, you know, out of his entire family, he got one response from one of his kids who was asking him to transfer some money. And we kind of had like a bit of a laugh about it. And, you know, but the point was, it's like, well, it's not about them, and it's not about their response, right? It's about you sending that message. It's about you saying, like, this is what I value.
Yeah.
This is how I'm going to live that value. And you've done it. So like that's the success bit, right? That's you're living in line with your value. It doesn't matter that, you know, they haven't responded this time. Like, you've done the thing.
And if we really think that it's the journey, that's the important part.
Yeah. It definitely caught me off guard, that little conversation. Sort of like a subtle reframe, like, and I guess.
But it's so useful.
It is, and it just goes to show we never really have anything probably figured out still, do we? And I'm probably never changed the rest of my life, so still working things out as we go through.
Well, Woody, thanks once again for taking the time to come on the podcast. I really appreciate it. It's great to catch up with you as well.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for all showing interest, and good to meet you as well, Leah.
I love this conversation. I'm so happy I was here for it.
If you have enjoyed today's conversation, please do like, share, tell people about the podcast, and direct them to 80percentmental.com or wherever you normally listen. You can subscribe there. You can listen to all of our other episodes, of which Woody has been on one way back in series 1, if you're not American. Find us on the internet that they have now, on Twitter at EPM Podcast. Or on Instagram at 80percentmental. Thank you so much for listening if you've made it this far, and we will be back with more episodes soon, and I'll see you next time. Although we won't.
Except.
We won't see you because it's not a podcast work, is it?